I'll let you know.
Sometimes it's very common. One around in a way, makes sense of the world. No, straight up.
Right. Right.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, you know, so you know it's very
Is that covering it all?
Go much more. It's a lot of weight on that. I carry the whole thing. You have a link, yeah. Can you click that? Yeah, so I can respond. You're number 13. You saw it? No, right after that.
Yeah.
David, I replied to the lousy thing about me is I'm not really good at doing that. No. No, I I'm a doer, I'm not a delegate. At least I
You want that. You talk good about me, talk bad about me, as long as you want me.
Oh, by the way,
You don't care about that.
I'm not so good at music, but I want to be better. Basically, because the way to do that is you're asking to a certain task, and you support them in doing that task, and you're their cheerleader, you're close to destruction, and you allow people to. Appreciate that. I'm gonna put down a couple of things on here.
Fine. Okay, first I want to thank Rabbi Rahmani, the Shiur Melazech Nishmas, Rabbi's father, Rabbi Noam Zichron Livracha, his the Sham Shav and Aliyim.
Underneath that, there's another.
And also, Alyssa Jen Schweinberg, Li'ilui Nishmas, Rochem Nechama Bas Avraham Mordechai, and the Sham Shav and Aliyim, Hol Yom Shel Simcha Nachas and Brach. Okay, we were learning. You have to learn the letters of tzaddikim. The igros of tzaddikim require tremendous limud. We learned the first part of a letter that Rav Hutner wrote to a Talmud, who was obviously going through some challenges, some difficulties. And I hope that you have it. You probably still have it on your phone if you have the pages. I think I gave the pages list.
The letter?
The letter from Achid Yitzchak.
Goes on the phone.
Yeah, we didn't finish the letter. The yesod of this very, very famous, and important Igeris was really captured in the English sentence that the Rosh Yeshiva wrote in the middle: lose battles but win wars. And the Talmud, because of what he was struggling with in the Yetzer Hara, whatever it was complaining that he no longer felt that he was Shosul B'Veis Hashem, that he was no longer a person that, he wasn't the same person that came to the yeshiva, that was deeply grounded in Avodas Hashem and so on. He felt that he had wandered away from that because of these nisyonos that he was going through, the milchamas that he was going through. And the Rosh Yeshiva is explaining to him that the shorus of his neshama is not shalva, it's not tranquility, but the shorus of his neshama. And b'chlal, most of the neshamas of our generation is not the shorus of our neshamas. We spoke about this years ago, that we are mostly neshamas of tohu, and the end before Mashiach comes, the shorus of our neshamas is not tranquility. You can go to the Bahamas and spend the rest of your life there, and it doesn't make a difference. It's who we are. This last generation before Mashiach comes is a generation of upheaval. And upheaval doesn't mean physically, because things have never been better, even though, of course, there are people that suffer all kinds of sorrows, but it's not about the physical upheaval, it's about the nisyonos, particularly what we've been talking about, the nisyonos of Yosef HaTadik. I don't know if this letter is specifically about that. There are hints to that. But the last we were learning was how Rav Hutner says very strongly that the tipshim, the fools, misinterpret the pasuk that says in pasuk that Shalmach says Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam. And the tipshim, the way they misinterpret that, he was saying that, but the truth is, if you look at the Rishonim that say that, that's the simple pshat. But he says the tipshim, they say the pshat in pasuk is that even though the tzaddik falls 7 times, he pulls himself together, which is an admirable thing also. But Rav Hutner says that's the pshat. Pshat is the same letters as tipesh, right? Those who only believe in pshat are tipshim. So the tipshim, he says, they understand that the pshat is that even though the tzaddik fell 7 times, he still gets up. But the true meaning of the pasuk is that the path towards becoming a tzaddik is davke through those nefilas, and those nisyonos, and those milchamas. And that's what we were talking about last week, and that's why let's just review the first sentence. We're on page Reish Yud Ches, Reach, page Reish Yud Ches. We read just a sentence or two from that top paragraph where it begins with the word Ahuvi, my beloved. That's where we just started that paragraph. Ahuvi hineni loiches ois chelovavi. My beloved, I'm holding you to my heart. V'loiches ba'is nechen, I'm whispering into your ear. Ki ilu hayim mechtavcha mesapeli al odas hamitzvahs amaisim tovim shelcha. If the letter had been just a report of how successful you are with your learning and your mitzvahs and your Yetzer Tov, if it would have been a letter like that, I would have said that I got a good letter. Now that your letter is describing and talking about in a very honest way the Yeridas, the Nephilas, your failures, your challenges, and so on, your Milchamas. So now I'm telling you that the letter that I received from you is not Tov, it's Tov Ma'od. Because we learned that Tov Ma'od is the Eitzar. That's what we learned last week, and the Rosh Yeshiva was writing to him, that's why he said he's going to explain how he began the letter, that everything that he tells this student, that everything you wrote in the letter is itself, whatever you wrote to me is the opposite of your conclusion. Your conclusion is that the fact that you're going through these struggles means that you're lo tov, that you're not good. Kilo, a person who has mochamas and goes through those sheva or shivim nefilos, those yeridas, kilo, that person is lo tov. No, Shiva says that's Chazal told us that tov mode is the Eitzar. and now that you've honestly shared with me some of your struggles, I can tell you that the letter is Tov Ma'od. It's a very good letter. And he explains, Ruchacha is where we're up to. Ruchacha so'eris l'kras ha'she'ifa liyaz gadol. You have a ruach that's so'ara, a stormy ruach, that has she'ifas that wants very much liyaz gadol to be a great person. He spoke about it, we saw that last week. So Rav Shiva says, I'm asking you, don't paint this portrait or this picture in your mind of Gedolim, of what it means, how do we define a Gadol? Don't define a Gadol in such a way Shahem v'yitzam hatov b'bchinas chadhu. That the Yetzirah, that rather the Yetzirah Tov and the Tzadik, it's all the Gadol, the Adam Gadol, chadhu. You, when we look back and we think about these Gedolim, these Tzadikim, it seems to us that they didn't have any Ra in them at all. That there was only Tov. And everything was just the Yetzirah Tov. So the Rosh Yeshiva is saying, that the Adam Gadol and the Yetzirah Tov Chadhu, it's one Mitzias and there's nothing else. That's it. I want to tell you the true greatness of Gedol Yisrael. And it's so fascinating because and touching because of all the Rosh Yeshiva, the Litvish Rosh Yeshiva that came to America right, before the war, and after the war, the life of the Rosh Yeshiva of Rav Hutner was the most colorful, was the most let's say stormy. Using the same word, there was a sorry. He was a person that was mamish, lived in a storm, and he had all of that. And many of the letters are about how desperately he wanted to be his own person, to be independent, to be himself. And he was not typical, and his writings, his teachings were not typical of the Gedolim that came to America at that time. And that's why I've been saying for many years why there is no biography of Rav Hutner. Recently, they came out with something which is very, very nice. I think Art School put out something very nice. Or maybe it's not Art School. I'm not sure. But one of the English publishing companies put out a very nice sefer, which is really an adaptation of his daughter Rebbetzin Bruria's some of her biographical notes, which she was very careful with those notes. Some of those biographical notes, together with some of his teachings, with some of his Torahs. And it's I looked at it very quickly. My wife's actually in the middle of it now. I looked at it very quickly, and it's a beautiful job. But the much more geschmack stuff is not in there. You understand? It's not there. Even if you look at a picture of it, from the early years, from the big trip that he had. It's not that there's not going to be a thorough, accurate biography that's going to be put out. Certainly not by any Frum publisher. There was a very, very hush of a book that came out. I don't know what I did with it. I probably lent it to somebody. I haven't seen it in a long time. But that Reb Hillel Goldberg from Denver, who's a terrific writer and a terrific person, that Reb Hillel Goldberg wrote a book called From Berlin to Slobodka, Slobodka to Berlin. I don't know if you have read it. So there he writes about certain great people that they went through that journey from Europe and Berlin, and they were there together. Rav Hutner and Lubavitch Rebbe were in Berlin together. Also, Rav Yeshua Heschel, Dr. Heschel, was at that time, which of course he's an outlier in the Frum world because of he ended up going to the conservative seminary, teaching there. And who else? Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik. So these geniuses who came from the purest, deepest roots of Brisk and Warsaw, and that they traveled somehow together. They were not none of those great people were not typical of yeshiva bachrim. Let's put it that way. Even there are many yeshiva bachrim that went completely off, but here we had great people, huge Talmidei Chachamim. Of course, Dr. Heschel came from purely Hasidic background. He came from Rebbes, from big Rebbes, and he was slated to be a big Rebbe. The Kapistnitzer Rebbe was his mishpacha, and he used to go. Dr. Heschel used to go to the Tish. He used to go sometimes to the Tish, and the Kapistnitzer put him right next to him. I'm sure the Chassidim are not always so happy about that, but he put him right next to him. And they say the Kapistnitzer I read said, he used to say, the Rebbe said, who was at that time, the Lower East Side, him and Rav Moshe were the best friends, and the Kapistnitzer Rebbe was like the biggest Rebbe. And the Kapistnitzer used to say that Dr. Heschel said it's a good thing that you went off, because otherwise all the Rebbes we would have all been out of business. All the Chassidim would have gone to you. So shkoyach that you know. This way we have a Penosa, we have a Ristave, you went off. And he said it with a twinkle in his eye. Dr. Heschel was Novominsk and Abderov. He was from purely Chassidic background. And in his own way, he became a different type of a Chassidic Rebbe. That's itself a very, very complicated story about Dr. Heschel. And I think the Novominsker was actually there. The Novominsker Rebbe was my son-in-law's uncle. The Novominsker Rebbe was there, I think, just a short time before Dr. Heschel, right before he died. And he left the world like as a Chassidic. But anyway, Rabbi Yosef Ber, of course, Rabbi Yosef Ber, that's pure Brisk, and with the Chassidic influence, of course, from Chabad, and Rav Hutner, who was one side Chassidic and one side Litvish, and he was the merging of those two worlds, and was very, very steeped in the Torah of Rav Tzadik and Ishbitz and Lublin. He was very, very steeped in that limud, and with all of Chassidus. At the same time, he was a Talmud of Slobodka. So Hillel Goldberg wrote a fantastic book. It's probably like I think it's out of print. One of those things that costs $1,000 if you look at it online. I don't know, but it's a gewaldige book. That was already must be 30 years ago. That book, more. There are some insights and something into the life of the Rosh Yeshiva. But there's a reason why. It's because he himself was a Ruach Sa'ar. So he understands this Talmud, and that's what he's writing to him. He's saying, if you want to really, really appreciate the Gedolei Olam, to look and to learn from them. Not just people are just beyond you and forget it. They're just these, like we said last week, they were from birth, tzaddikim from birth. Not because then people read these stories and they say, okay, that's the Chavetz Chaim, that's the Chassam Sofer, that's the Sam Rebbe, that's the the Blueshiver Rebbe, whatever you read these, and you say, okay, that's not me. It's not me. Someone told me that the best-selling books that they have, that they put out, that the Frum publishers put out, are the ones that are about the tzaddikim that they could relate to the most. So, for instance, Rav Feifeld, the book on Rav Feifeld, runaway bestseller. There was a yid that I was together with in the country for many, many years. That was an extraordinary person. Shimmy Gross, not Shimmy. No. It's a second slipped my mind the name, but Shlomi Gross. Yeah, Shlomi Gross. We were together in the mountains, and I knew him very, very well. Shlomi was an unbelievable person, a gutter like this. He was thrown out of every yeshiva that he was in, and instead of becoming bitter, his whole life was just doing and helping and giving. So that biography that Art School put out about Shlomi is also like a tremendous, tremendous bestseller. Because people, when you read about Rav Hutner, about Rav Freifeld, Rav Shlomo Freifeld, you see it's a boy that grew up in America, and you could relate to the things that he went through, about even with Nosson Tzvi Finkel. So these are tzaddikim that are very, very relatable, and therefore you see that people are most inspired by these stories, as opposed to we stand in awe of the Satmar Rebbe, for instance, but the second you open up and you read the first page about the Satmar Rebbe, you say, okay, this is interesting, but it's not. I can't do this. I can't do this. It's not me. I can't do this.
There was a book that was put out like 20 years ago. I remember when I was in yeshiva, Making of a Gadol. That was a band.
It was banned. I read it. I read it when it came out. It was sent to me, and I read it.
I didn't read it, but I just
remember
it had to do with this.
It exactly had to do with it, but it was too much. It was too much. It wasn't written in a respectful way. There were, he had the inside. He had, because he was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky's son, wrote it. Nosson wrote it, and Rabbi Nosson was the son-in-law of my Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Lipshitz. So he had the inside scoop, But there were things that were written. That's why they took it off. I didn't blame them for taking it off. I was very. I got rid of it. I didn't want to have it in the house. It was
It's worth a lot of money now.
What?
It's worth a lot of money now.
Yeah, I should have. No, I heard that it's like contraband, right? It's hard. Yeah, because that was the. If you ever want to sell a lot of, you get, if it's put in the chayv, you're gonna make a lot. So that book was right away like banned, and but I didn't want to hold on to it. Again, I have tremendous respect for the author, but it was written in such a way that it didn't give a full picture, and it was focusing on certain kleinigkeit of Rosh Yeshivas it was just painful to read. It was painful to read, and a careful balance would be to what Rav Hutner is talking about. What Rav Hutner is saying is that to see the greatness of these people, how they overcame certain things. They had to overcome. We don't have any hasaga of what a nisayon was back then in Europe before the war. Just to be, if you were in yeshiva, to be a yeshiva bacher in those years, it's not the same as now. Now it's more the Indian of Yosef HaTadik. Now that's the nisayon now is Yosef HaTadik. It's the Indian of Kedusha. The boys that are falling off now is not because they're reading Aristotle or Bialik or Chernychovsky. You understand? That's not. These guys never heard of Chernychovsky, and they can't spell philosophy mostly. We're not talking here about big theologians that are struggling with, the question of why is it that good people suffer and bad people prosper. They just want to have a girlfriend. That's really it's not that complicated. But in those years, since I mentioned about Hutner and the Kapishim, so I'll tell you an interesting story. I told you once. I heard this from a Rav from Queens. He probably wouldn't want me to say his name, but an old Rav. He's no longer alive, and he was a Heusbacher. He used to help in the house of Rav Hutner. He spent some years or time taking care of the Rosh Yeshiva in the house, different things like a shtickle gabay a hoisbah. So he said that the Rosh Yeshiva, the Rav Hutner, used to spend summers in Arvin. You know where that is? Rockaways. That's
On the way to the bridge.
on the way to the bridge, right? Before Bell Harbor, right? That was my wife also. That's where they went for the summers. That was a big spot for Jews back then. I have a brother-in-law whose father from Eretz Yisrael. My brother-in-law is here now, but his father was a huge Talmid Chacham, and he has an album with pictures of Rosh Yeshiva in bathing suits. His friends, that's also I can make a lot of money on that too. Some of the pictures had women in them too. So his mother has that in Yerushalayim, that album. So the Rosh Yeshiva was in Arvin, and that's where a lot of the Moshe used to go there, and that was getting away from the city, to get away a little bit. And so he told me, this Rav from Queens told me that he was there, and that Rav Hutner. Now I know if people hear this tape, they're going to get probably upset. They're going to say it's not true, it's a lie, it's a lie. The Argan Nishnish, like my mother says. So, but I heard this from the Rav that was there, and he said that Rav Hutner was sitting with another Rosh Yeshiva. I don't remember another Rosh Yeshiva. Also a Litvish Rosh Yeshiva, and they were sitting with the poetry of Chaim Nachman Bialik, and they were like learning it b'charusa. They were arguing over one of Bialik's poems, and which of course is a major no. But they were. So then this Rav told me that he was standing by the window, taking care of them. He was standing by the window, and he saw the Kapishin Rebbe, the same Rebbe from Lower East Side. He saw Kapishin walking with his silver cane, and he was coming down the block, and he was making a turn up to the bungalow to say hi, to give shalom, to see how Rav Hutner is doing. They were friendly. So this Rav said that he said to the two Rosh Yeshiva, he said, the Kapishis Rebbe is coming. So they took the Bialiks and they put it under themselves. They sat on the books, and the Rebbe walked in and they didn't stand all the way up. And the Rebbe came in.
Truffin.
Huh?
Truffin.
Yeah, the Truffin, right. The Rebbe came in and they sit him down. The Rebbe is sitting there, and the Rebbe is a little bit, and they bring him some tea, and the Kapishna says, "I'll tell you which is my favorite poem from me." It's a great story. And they say, it's okay, we're safe. It was a different world. Again, if someone can say it's not true, this person told to me, Mamish Lafi Tumo, that he was there, and he was in the house when this happened. When it happened. And so you could say, so then there will be people say you can't say such a thing, that can't be printed in any book, and you're not allowed to talk about that, it never happened. Yeah, that's the Kapishna said, and that's Rav Moshe.
It's my father's Tish.
That's your father's, they were both there.
Yeah. My father knew him
I
from
think you
when
once showed this to me.
Yeah, he was a little boy when he knew him as a little boy.
He was on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, he said he was the sweetest to him. And he came to his kasana because my father always gave fit out to him.
That's a great picture. Send it to the guys. So that's Rav Moshe and the Kapishna. So they were mamish, the closest friends. Rav Moshe and the Kapishna were best friends. Best friends. You see, that's a beautiful picture. Wow. That's historic. That's great. So the godless of that, the greatness of that story is that they were great people. They were tzaddikim. Rav Hutner was a tzaddik. The Kapishnas were tzaddik. They were tzaddikim. And what the Rosh Yeshiva is writing is that these inyanim of what we go through in life and our milchamas, whatever they are, it doesn't make a person smaller. That's the greatness of a person is that color of each and every one of us in our journey to try to connect to Hashem. And I'm sure that the same way that the Rosh Yeshiva, that those Rosh Yeshiva and the Rebbe saw something in Bialik, even though Bialik was Nishan Unzer, as they say, but they saw something in Bialik that had in it a Nakuda of Kedusha that they were thinking about. These were great people that thought deeply about things. Not the way that they try to color everything like just black and white. Rav Moshe was probably the most tmimistic of the whole of that whole chabur of tzaddikim. Rav Moshe was very interesting. But what do you think Rav Moshe didn't? What Rav Moshe saw when he was in Europe and what he went through? I'm not talking about with the Nazis. I'm talking with the communists. And then later on, Rav Moshe knew exactly what was going on in the world, and he was very, very up to date in the world. And that's just, they don't. But this is the part that they're trying to hide. And the Rashi was saying to his Talmud, he said that if you want to have an accurate picture of Gedolei Olam, imagine in your mind, think of the letters Oisius of Milcham and Ara, of tremendous wars, of fierce battles. With all the lowest instincts, the same that we have. That the Gedolim, they became Gedolim, they fought through those. But don't think that they didn't have these problems. They have these problems. So therefore, the whole Torah is called Sefer Milchamas Hashem. That's what's called. Remember, Sefer Milchamas Hashem, the book of Hashem's wars. So we once spoke about that many years ago. There's a whole machlekes. What are these Milchamas? Sefer Milchamas Hashem. The Torah tells us there's a Sefer Milchamas Hashem. Sefer Milchamas Hashem means to be in this world. There's a Sefer Milchamas Hashem. Dalacha, he said, you should know. So when you feel this sa'ara, when you feel this, the enemy attacking you, like I was talking, we're learning about Shal Shudas, when you feel that Amalek is upon you, and you, this Aras HaYetzer, and this powerful Yetzirah, Dalacha shebezeh hincha mizdame el agdolim harbe yoser, you should know that when you're dafka, when you feel that war, and you're in that war, you are more similar to the Gedolim, you resemble the Gedolim, much more so than when it's just a nice quiet day. And like you envision that you should have no Yetzar. You should know you're more similar to the Tzaddikim and the Gedolim on those days when you're fighting a war than on those days when it's Menucha Nechayin, like it's Shabbosdik, everything is quiet. Every sentence here is mamish like gold. Davke in those places of your life where you see that you're going through the worst you read this and the most you read this. This is straight from Rav Tzadik now what he says. This is from Sikas HaTzadik. We learned that piece from Sikas HaTzadik. Davke ba'oisam ha'makoymes oimed hinchelios kli litzdain l'shal kvayt shamayim. Davke in those areas of your life where you go through the worst and the most you read this. You're davka in those areas, you should know that you are a kli that fight those wars, fight those battles. You're a kli in those areas to bring tremendous kavod shamayim. Davka in those areas that you're struggling with, in those milchamas. When I first learned this, I wrote some things. I have this for it's like 40 years, over 40 years old. So I wrote a thing from the Yosef HaTadik from Slonim on the side that the Yosef HaTadik said. There's a quote from the Yisrael from the first Slonim. He says, he said the following: Yom sheYehudi eino oseh pu'ula hepech ritzono. Any day of a person's life where he doesn't do something which is the hepech of what he wants to do, which is the opposite of what he'd rather do. In other words, whether it's in Sur Meirah or let's say in Sur Meirah, if there's something that's very tempting, it's pulling you. And you don't go against it, the opposite. Or there's something that you should be doing and you're not doing, and you overcome that. So he says, the Slonim says, Yom sheYehudi ena osa pu'ula hepech ritzano, lishbor koach hara. Any day of your life where you're not doing something which is the opposite of what you, which is the opposite of what your rotzen is to do, lishbor koach hara. Any day that you not do something to break, to fight against the koach of Ra, eino nechshav liyom b'chayim, does not count as a day of your life. It's any day which is just smooth sailing. The Yisod HaTadik says is not counted in your life as a day. When you're Babi Yomim, it doesn't count. Akidei kach. A day without a milchama. In other words, if you didn't overcome some taiva that day, it's not a day. If you didn't do something that you didn't feel like doing, a favor for somebody, something to do to take care of it, a friend, whatever it is. If you didn't have to go against yourself, if you weren't in any war that day, the Yisrael says, if you weren't in a war, any day that you did not fight in a war, that you weren't part of some battle, either latov or to not do something bad, he says, that's what he, nechshav, eino nechshav liyom b'chaim. That's where there's a ma'aseh. I told it to the kids in the house. I think I told them this ma'aseh in the summer, that with the Klosenberg Eskusi line of the Yosef HaTadik, that there was some kind of I don't remember the background now, but there was some kind of a ma'aseh. There was a yid. Yeah, there was a yid that saved. He was building the hospital, Shari Tzedek, not Shari Tzedek, Laniado Hospital in Sanz. The Rabbi, that was a big project that he built to build the hospital after the Mulchama. Because he made a thing that if I survive, I'm going to build a Jewish hospital. But Jews will be taking care of Jews. And it will be done with halacha, with compassion, which is, Laniado was one of the most chashuv hospitals in Eretz Yisrael. So there was a yid that the Chassidim brought to him, that was a wealthy person, and he had a check that he was going to give to the Rebbe that was going to save the whole project, like a very good amount of money that was going to keep the hospital, put up the hospital. So these things usually come with something. It's like when you have a gvir that gives a lot of money to the school, to the yeshiva, but then he has to tell you how to run it. It usually comes with something. Not always, but usually. So this gvir said to the Rebbe that he's giving him this to build the hospital. I think it was the hospital or maybe the yeshiva. I don't remember. I'm giving you this check, but I want the Rebbe's Olam Haba. Either the Rebbe's Olam Haba to be next to the Rebbe's Olam Haba. I think the Rebbe's Olam Haba, but it was one of these deals, One of these deals, and the city can take these things seriously. Like we could, we joke about it, like, okay, is there Mecca Chememka? You can make a deal with Olam Haba. There is such a thing in this discussion in the post, but okay, but it's not for now. So he said, but I'll give the check, and the house, everything's covered, but I want the result. So Rebbe said to him, you could have my Olam Haba. I want the hospital. You could have my Olam Haba. But I'll tell you what I'm not prepared to give to you for the deal. He says, the years that I was in concentration camp, I'm not prepared to give up. Because he said, listen to this, Murray. He said, because what I fought and how I suffered to remain a Jew and hold on to Hashem, to believe in Him during those years, I'm not Michael. I wouldn't trade that to him. You get my Olam Haba, you could have it. My time at concentration camp, I'm not letting go. That's what he said. It's a big thing. Because of the Milchama to be a Jew. When the whole world was falling apart, and everything was saying is that there's no tachlis, and how can you do this to you? And we know the stories that we have now. You have that we have books on the Klosenberger, on Mesius Nefesh, what was during the war with him. And my father was actually to see me after the war. The Mesius Nefesh, even after the war, was Mesius Nefesh. It's unbelievable. He tore off his socks that he had. He had high stockings. He wore white stock. He tore it off to give to a girl that didn't have. And he knew a chesed girl from the home, and she was walking around after the war like that, and she was crying that she doesn't have anything. And they took off his stockings and this time. And his whole Messias was Messias of Messias Nefesh and everything. But he said that I'm not giving up. Because when you're in the Milcham now we have our brothers in Eretz Yisrael, some girls too, that they've been fighting. It's almost a year in this Milcham, and I've had the schus of speaking to quite a few soldiers during this past year that have something to come back. Some I speak to on the phone, and they also the lashonos of Hisayrus, unbelievable Hisayrus. Yemoshe Nefesh to save Jews. It's Mesius Nefesh to save Am Yisrael. Anybody that's come into contact with any of the Chaver, that Chaver, that, like I was just driving back from my mother, and I saw that there's a person in front of me had all like these religious bumper stickers, from different schools and stuff. Right? Okay, and there was one that my son was MVP for a day. I guess in the baseball, in the little league or something like that. And I, which is nice. But I was thinking about that's like a godless of a kid here in America. Yeah, it was he had a double and a home run that morning, and he's got boys that are 2 years older than him there, that are crawling around in tunnels someplace. MVP. I must give an MVP. That's why greatness is very, very hard for us. Greatness is something which is very elusive, because without milchamas, that's what he said about. That's what the Rosh Hashiva is saying. You want to understand the God? You want to think in your mind. He's telling a student what it means to be a God, and you think that because you're having the feelers and you read this in milchamas, that means that you're not a God. That's how the Gedolim became Gedolim. Because of their milchamas. Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam. Not despite their milchamas, which is the way that they try to paint all these things and make it everything rosy and nice and everything is easier. But despite that, not despite, because of the milchamas. That's what he's writing to him. Davka, Boisam HaMakom is Oimed Hincha Lias Kli Le'etztainish L'Koved Shamayim. Davka. Ein Charoitz Lignav is Daiti. So you wrote in the letter that you don't want to mislead me. Like I think I'm your Rebbe, I'm your Shiva, so I think you're a terrific guy, and you want to be honest with me. You want to tell me the truth. You don't want to be going to das. You want to tell me the truth that you're not such a tzaddik. Right? You're not such a tzaddik. Ein cheroitz lignav is daiti. Sha'ak shabalacha she'incha nimtza b'kav ha'tov. You don't want me to think. You're so honest. You don't want me to think that everything is b'kav ha'tov. Everything is good. V'od shebe'emes hincha kach v'kach. The truth, you wanted to tell me the truth. That the emes is, I'm not the bacher you think I am. I'm really kach v'kach. These are the things I'm dealing with. I'm struggling with. Void kach v'sheva pamim kach. 7 times that. Vani mali l'kol ha'sheva pamim halol. So Rosh Hashiva says, you think that I am impressed with these 7 nefilas that you're telling me about, with your, and that now I don't think you're a good bacher. B'shvili, the Rosh Hashiva says, b'shvili, uvdas ha'yesodi, for me, the most basic fact is, ki b'meshach ha'charef ha'avar, that this past winter, because one of the things he wrote in the letter, I guess, is that this past winter, rachash l'cha yidiyah haguna b'hilchas niskei mamen, you were learning, you were focusing on this area of chayshim mishpat, niskei mamen, chazarta kama pamim ala mesachta shalamarta, and you wrote that you were able to review, with all of your milchamas, you were able to review the Masechta that you learned in the yeshiva. You reviewed it a few times. Lo tachish, you said. Don't deny that now. You wrote it me yourself that you did this. Zui ha'uvda ha'machriya. This is the deciding fact or factor in your life that you didn't let go of the Gemara, you didn't let go of the Chayshim Mishpat. With what you were going through, with your ups and downs, you held on and you fought. In this fact of your chazering the Gemara and whatever you were learning, in this fact, Gonus Sod HaNitzachon is hidden the secret, the mystery of your victory. The Ma'avak HaYitzarim Shecha, in this Ma'avak, in this war that you have with your Yitzhara, that during the time that you are in that war, you're holding on. You're holding on to the Gemara. And in the letter you wrote to me, I'll never forget. You used to be. I had this rotzen that you had. You wrote to me. You had this rotzen that you were going to be matzliach, and you're going to go Michael Lachal higher and higher. Michael Lachal, like whichever bar mitzvah bracha, you should go Michael Lachal. You should go higher and higher and higher. Aval chaval kar of the tikvasi. That was a sentence from this bracha's letter. Chaval of that tikvasi. What does it mean of the tikvasi? I've lost my hope. I'm not going to be that person that goes Michael el Chayil. Like the biographies also, Chayil el Chayil. It only shows like this, a line. And any of their kates at the meiz panam lahachish mitzias chayil. So Rosh Shiva says, I don't know how you have such chutzpah to deny the living reality. You're telling me you have not ascended, you haven't gone up? You're telling me you haven't become greater since the time that you came to the Medrash? I don't know that you're such a mechutzav. I never knew that you're such an asispanim, the way you're talking now, such chutzpah. Because why? You see in yourself that your Yetzer Hara is getting the better of you sometimes. Sometimes you lose a battle, and your Yetzer Hara sometimes gets you. Here's the word tipshus again. You think in your foolishness, and in your naivete. That all hope is lost. That's because you're a tipish. You're a fool. And you're a naive, immature fool. To think that means, because of your Yetzer Hara, and what you have with your Yetzer Hara, that of the tikvas, I'm never going to be a great person. Your words cause me to mamish this to laugh. Like it's incredible. I want you to know, I'm not making fun of you, he says. And he says, I am together with you in your suffering with Ra. What a sentence. But your suffering with your Yetzer Hara is the rechem of godless. What does it mean? Rechem is the womb of greatness. As you are in the womb, suffering is the womb in which greatness grows. Suffering is the struggling, milchamis, nisyonis, is the womb in which the gadol grows. I've watched your face, the Rosh Shiva says, I've seen your face when you're learning something deep in halacha b'iyun. And I've watched you when you're listening to the shir. I've watched you when you're listening to the shir. When the Rosh Shiva used to have like a tish, and I watched you. I watched your face on Shvi Shel Pesach by the Fabrengen. Now, the letters that are inscribed on your face during those times are the letters. In the end, there will be greatness here. Days back and forth, up and down, soif hakavod lava. In the end, soif hakavod lava. Ein shvil hakavod mispatel derech mishar. But I want you to understand that the path towards that kavod, towards that greatness, is not a straight path. Shvil hakavod mispatel derech mishar. He says, ein shvil hakavod. The shvil, that path that leads to greatness, is not a straight path. Shvil hakavod over mistovev kenachash alei derech. The path towards that kavod doesn't mean kavod like getting kavod. It means of becoming great. That he says that path is mistovev kenachash alei derech. It twists and turns like a snake on the path. Uchishefifon alei orech, like a serpent on the way. So you feel a little bit of the snake poison. You feel some poison of the snake that's inside you, the Yetzer Hara. You feel some of the snake's poison. Like Hashem told the Rishon, that it'll give you a bite and you'll crush its head. You'll win. But you get bitten sometimes. What do? You want to avoid all snakes? You want to be on a perfectly straight path. You want to avoid anything like there shouldn't be. I mentioned yesterday from Rav Mendel Furtefas Bashal Shudas, the great Chabad Mashpia. So he wrote there that he was very, very, very sick, and he said that he was barely alive at some point, and they put him into some sort of an infirmary. They were talking about the Russian prison camp. They put him into the infirmary. And some nurse was going around, or somebody was going around looking at all the chaver there in the infirmary, and she was covering the dead people with sheets, and she put a cover over his head. She thought and the fourth of us said she thought I was dead. She put a sheet over my head. He said I was barely alive. She put a sheet over my head, and I'm lying there. And he said, when I was 8, and he said to himself, this is what he wrote. When I was 8 years old, my father brought me to the Rabbi Yashab, and the Rabbi Yashab gave me a bracha for Arichas Yomim, actually a long life. And I said to Hashem under the sheet, I said to Hashem, you call this a long life? It's a gewaltige meis. And he said, and I threw the thing off, and I sat up to get beaten and to get kicked. But again, go back into the bunk. He says, you call this a long life. Chavshi, that's the Rishiva says, you want to be alive, and you want to become something in this world. There are snakes. All along, there are snakes. See, we're raising this generation with nothing shayful, nothing bad. There's nothing. If there's any bad snake, I'm going to take you to a different camp where there are no snakes. I'm going to put you somewhere you don't have to worry about. That's what my mother tried that with me. My father didn't let. Not that I'm such a tough guy. You see, I'm not. But I told this to you once. That when I was a kid and we lived in Eretz Yisrael, so there was this thing that we were being taught how to shoot guns. They had a gadna, and once a week we had gadna. I was being taught how to shoot kids. We were in high school, how to shoot guns. So my mother wrote a whole letter to the principal that not that Moshe shouldn't hold a gun, that I shouldn't. My father got wind of this, and my father wrote another letter to say, I want Moshe to have 2 guns, one in his right hand and one in his left hand. And he says, don't, you go, the rest of the kids there, and you do whatever they're doing. My mother tried to hold it back. She tried to prevent it from happening. My father said, you go there. And that's, nowadays, every kid should be gleich. And then at the same time, you tell the kid, I want you to be an Adam Gadol. Adam Gadol. But if, God forbid, if the air conditioning's broken in the yeshiva, oh, day off. If it doesn't go, if things are not the way that, or somebody insulted you, or that Rebbe didn't say that you're a Rogashov or something, and he criticized you, forget it, different Rebbe, different yeshiva, because everything has to be just nice. But the Yeshiva is saying that's not the path to greatness. The impression that we get, the impression that we get from things that we heard, things that we read, we think that they went, and the Tzaddikim went like this. Like, it's simple. Even the Satmar Rebbe, what do you think? What he went through? This all Tzaddikim. Matzosil, just to end, I could have spoken to you about this in person, but I wanted this to be in writing. The reason I wrote it to you is because I want you to look at it once in a while. Because I talk to you, you walk out again, I want you to have a piece of paper and I want you to see this. And I want you to take this paper out and to look at it once in a while, to see it. Therefore, I only spoke in a general way. I didn't address the particular issues that you were talking about. I spoke in a general way of your whole attitude is messed up. I didn't go into your inyanim. We'll talk about that. But I wrote you a letter about your whole attitude, that your whole attitude is off. The way you think about your milchamis is totally off. That I wanted to write to you. As far as the particulars of your letter that you wrote to me, that's better. We'll talk upon. We'll speak about that. Atahu hashalsul beveis Hashem. You are planted in the house of Hashem. You said you're not. Atahu hashalsul beveis Hashem. And then he ends, I'm with you in your suffering. And I am certain of your victory. And I'm davening for your success. Yitzchak Hutner. And then he says, and after thing, post, now look back and you'll understand the first sentence that I wrote to you. That the letter that you wrote is misnagidhu, is the what you wrote in your letter is misnagid l'chol hatiyum and then what you wrote in your letter contradicts itself to the whole letter that you wrote. What you wrote is the story of your becoming great. You told me, you thought you're writing to me a letter about your becoming nothing, and your whole letter is a contradiction of that, because the path that you're describing is the path towards greatness, and that path towards greatness is a path that's not straight, it's crooked, but I'm with you, and I know you'll win, and I'm davening for success. And we should try to take that bracha and to bring it into all of ourselves and to give it over to all of our children. Because we think when I know I kept you last to go over also, I'm sorry. So you 25 minutes or so. No. One of the tzaddikim, I don't remember right now, one of the tzaddikim wrote, it was a rest of a mashpia, I can't remember, wrote that the problem that we have when we give mussar to our kids, he said that unless you see that problem on some level within yourself, and you're struggling with yourself, your kid's not going to hear you when you talk about it. Listen to this. In other words, if you think that this is something that ani naki, it's not me at all, but you're upset about with your kid something that you're very upset with your kid, and you give the kid mussar, and you think I'm the bal mussar, and that's the kid, right? He said, unless you are honest enough to look inside yourself and to see that on some level you have this inyan too. In other words, on some level you're still in the milchama, don't bother talking to your kid, he said. It's not going to work. His neshama knows that you're a phony, you're a fraud, and you're some buffoon that's going around saying mussar. Yeah, this is the same thing if you want to teach. To be a parent. When you look inside yourself, deep inside yourself, and you're able to say, Ani adayin b'milchama. I'm still in this milchama myself. Not the same way when I was 18. Okay. But I'm in the milchama. And then you talk to your kid. You don't have to tell him about your whole biography then. But then you talk to your kid about helping him and talking to him and giving him some advice. So then this tzaddik, I don't remember what this tzaddik said, he'll hear it. Because it's coming from a real and honest place. As another soldier. You know, soldiers, they're very tight with each other. You know that. Those are the best friends. When you were in a war with somebody, there are many things like this. Soldiers that fought together, those for life, they're the closest friends. You want to be a friend with your son? I don't mean a friend like a silly. You want your kid to connect to you? If you're fellow soldiers, the kid will hear you. But if you talk like you're some sort of like you're like this guy, the vice president, he says he was in a war. You heard about this? I don't know how people do such a thing. Doesn't he think that it's a Muslim like someone's going to find out? He said that he was in this war. And then all the guys that were there said he was never in the war. Right? So he thought maybe, I don't know, he thought he would get away with it. You don't get away with it. The kids know when you're another soldier. And when you make yourself to be one of these knackers and you're not a fellow soldier, you're not makabel. I mean, they might, go, but they're not makabel in a real neshama way. Neshama is a fellow soldier. We're in the war. Then the kid hears it, and you have to tell him all kinds of pratim. But if it's coming from that place inside of you that's real, that's honest, and that sees that inside yourself, that my son's just like me, in a certain way, just like me, then you already have a connection on the level of neshama that he'll hear you. But if you look at yourself as being above, aloof, and that's different, the kid's not going to be makabel. I think that's homework, is to think about that the whole week, what I just told you. Think about it.